Colleague Samkele about the terse note sent by the lawyers of former President Jacob Zuma, and because it's so short, I'm going to read it out quickly. It says, "Dear Acting Registrar for the Judicial Commission of Inquiry into allegations of state capture and fraud in the public sector, including organs of state, stroke President J.G. Zuma, case number CCT 295/20. We're instructed by our client, President J.G. Zuma, that he will not be participating in these proceedings at all. Yours faithfully, Mabuza Attorneys." And Samkele, you were just telling us what the implications are for the former president refusing to take part.
Essentially, the former president will have no representation when this issue is being ventilated in the Constitutional Court. The court will only have the version of the various indictments that are brought against him by the State Capture Commission of Inquiry, and in particular, the Deputy Chief Justice and Chairperson of the State Capture Commission of Inquiry, Deputy Chief Justice Raymond Zondo. These are some of the issues that will be ventilated. Only one side of the perspective of the legal tussle that is there between the Deputy Chief Justice Raymond Zondo, the State Capture Commission of Inquiry, and the former president will be before the court judges, which essentially means that either the former president is acceding to the fact that he has a constitutional obligation to adhere to the State Capture Commission of Inquiry, which he instituted whilst he was still the former president of the Republic of South Africa. He has three names which were submitted to him by the Chief Justice, Mogoeng, and the former president has the prerogative to choose who will preside over the State Capture Commission of Inquiry, and subsequently he did choose the Deputy Chief Justice Raymond Zondo, and later on he revealed that the Deputy Chief Justice may be compromised when it comes to the issue and conflicted when it comes to the issue of sitting in the cross-examination of the testimony of the former President Jacob Zuma, and the virtue that the former president alleges that he and the Deputy Chief Justice are long-term friends and have been friends since the early 90s, and that there are also family relations between the two, and the virtue of the former president's estranged wife being the sister of the mother of the daughter of and child of the Deputy Chief Justice Raymond Zondo. So essentially, Deputy Chief Justice Raymond Zondo came out and saying that they are not friends, but this essentially means that the Concord will have one side of the version of events, which is from the State Capture Commission of Inquiry and the Deputy Chief Justice Raymond Zondo, and there will be no representation or affidavits being filed by the former President Jacob Zuma, which also has implications. And should the Concord rule that the former president has to abide by the summons of the State Capture Commission of Inquiry, it would mean that he'd have to be there. But the question also remains: will the former president decide to answer questions, or will he exercise his legal right to remain quiet and not answer any questions, like we've seen with the likes of Dudumien, who essentially said, quote, "May I not answer that question in case I incriminate myself," end of quote. So you may find that the former president may decide to take the same line of answering questions and line of march, such as the likes of Dudumien.
The decision to not speak to media at all, why do you think this decision was taken?
It's essentially not new that the former president's legal team decides not to speak to the media. For instance, if you look at the case of fraud and corruption and money laundering that he's currently facing with arms company tallies in the Pietermaritzburg Regional High Court, his legal team essentially refused to speak to any media personnel there. Yet remember that it's very few media houses, if any, have had any contact or any conversations with the legal team of the former president. The former president essentially decides not to speak to the media himself, and through his legal team, they essentially decide to release statements. Either the legal firm, the Mabuza Attorneys, releases statements on behalf of the president, or the Jacob Zuma Foundation releases statements on behalf of the former president. But you will never, or you will hardly ever find one of those two entities ever speaking out to the media, apart from just issuing out statements. So it's a strategy that they have adopted, not to speak to any media personnel, but to just release statements, and for their clients to just appear at the State Capture Commission of Inquiry if there needs to be basis. For instance, if you look at the last appearance of the former president, the Deputy Chief Justice did say through President Jacob Zuma's advocate that they would like to recuse Advocate Moses Kakan, that they would like to recuse themselves from the proceedings of the State Capture Commission of Inquiry. It is the State Capture of Inquiry lawyers who stood up and said that would mean that the former president is in violation of the summons that were issued out against him, which then, after the tea break and lunch break that was there, the former president, through the Deputy Chief Justice, did say to the State Capture Commission of Inquiry that the former President Jacob Zuma has essentially decided to leave the State Capture Commission of Inquiry and not come back to the proceedings that were instituted, and thus being in violation of the summons that were issued out against them. It essentially means that the former president is not willing to cooperate with the State Capture Commission of Inquiry, which he instituted as the former President of the Republic of South Africa after that court judgment. And also, the former president is essentially defying the highest decision-making structure of the governing body, which is the National Executive Committee of the African National Congress. You did hear the president of the ANC, Cyril Ramaphosa, addressing and closing that NEC meeting last week and saying that they, as the NEC, reaffirmed their support that the State Capture Commission of Inquiry must be supported, and that no frivolous attacks on the Deputy Chief Justice and Chairperson of the State Capture Commission of Inquiry must be played out. And they encourage all members of the party and leaders of the organization to adhere and to respect the wishes of the State Capture Commission of Inquiry, which has been called by the people of South Africa, and that all ANC members must cooperate with the State Capture Commission of Inquiry and with the Deputy Chief Justice Raymond Zondo, chairperson of the State Capture Commission of Inquiry. But it seems as if the former president of the ANC and former president of the country is essentially defying and daring the highest decision-making structure of his own organization that made him the president of the Republic and of the country.
As you say there, the latest correspondence is addressed to the highest decision-making body in the country. Do we know if this only applies to the Concord application or even the proceedings themselves?
It's not yet clear if this applies to the Concord appearance, or it also applies to the appearance of the State Capture Commission of Inquiry. But the former president has expressed his displeasure of continuing to appear before the State Capture Commission of Inquiry. If you'd go back to his legal team through Advocate Moses Kakan, they argued that it seems as if their client is on trial at the State Capture Commission of Inquiry. The Deputy Chief Justice Raymond Zondo had to come in and say that the former president is not on trial. He just must answer a few questions. That's when former President Zuma's legal team then started having some displeasures with the State Capture Commission of Inquiry, and then they decided to go on what has been the strategy of the former president for the past 15 or so years, which is the Stalingrad approach of stalling whatever legal proceedings that are there against him, which includes the corruption trial that he's currently facing. You'd remember that he'd wanted a permanent stay of prosecution on that particular matter, and now he's avoiding issues of answering questions at the State Capture Commission of Inquiry, pleading that the chairperson of the State Capture Commission of Inquiry is conflicted and compromised on the virtue of his family relations with the former president. It essentially means that there is a breakdown in relations when it comes to the issues of cooperation between both parties of the State Capture Commission of Inquiry, including that of the legal team of the former President Jacob Zuma, who was the very same man who instituted the State Capture Commission of Inquiry, which he has grievances against now, and he is the one who chose the chairperson of the State Capture Commission of Inquiry, being the Deputy Chief Justice Raymond Zondo. But the former president seems to have displeasures now in the commission that he had initially set up and had the terms of reference drawn up by himself and through the work of the Constitutional Court as well when the issue was taken to the Concord.
The former president is known as a chess player. What moves remain for Deputy Chief Justice Raymond Zondo stemming from this correspondence?
Essentially, it means that the former president is essentially going up against the apex court in the land. He's defying the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa. He's defying the very same principles he sought to uphold when he was sworn in as the President of the Republic of South Africa in 2009. It essentially means he's going against those issues and those code of ethics that he had espoused to stand up to and to protect the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa by him defying to answer and to file answering affidavits, which is within his rights if he chooses not to file any answering affidavits. But it would essentially mean that the Constitutional Court would not have a balanced perspective and a balanced view when it comes to this issue, because they would essentially have one side of the story in their hands, which is not the Constitutional Court's fault. It is the fault of the defendant who is supposed to go to the Constitutional Court and defend himself with this particular case being brought against him by the Deputy Chief Justice Raymond Zondo through the State Capture Commission of Inquiry. But it would remain to be seen what other chess move the former president could play as a chess player when it comes to this issue of his legal embattlements with the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa, and also with him being at odds with the Deputy Chief Justice of and Chairperson of the State Capture Commission of Inquiry, Deputy Chief Justice Raymond Zondo. But it essentially means that the former president is defying the highest decision-making structure of the governing party, which said all members of the party must cooperate with the State Capture Commission of Inquiry. Is also going against the very same constitution he vowed to uphold when he was sworn in as the President of the Republic in 2009, which would be rather interesting that they have always preached that the judiciary of the country and the Constitution must be respected, but it seems as if the former president is going against the very same State Capture Commission of Inquiry which he instituted.
Samkele, just on another story that apparently just broke, News 24 in an article by Karine du Plessis saying breaking. Ace Magashule must immediately step aside, rules ANC's Integrity Commission. Apparently the national spokesperson, Pule Mabi, doesn't really know about this. What have you heard?
It essentially means that the Integrity Commission of the ANC, when it comes to the incumbent leaders of the ANC being at odds with the Constitution of the governing party and being at odds with the Constitution of the Republic, whether they are charged with issues of fraud and corruption, doesn't mince their words. They don't play soft with the current leaders of the governing party. You've had reports in the past that have been leaked from that were reports of the Integrity Commission that have said the likes of the Deputy Minister of Finance, Dr. David Masondo, must step aside and resign from his executive positions as the Deputy Minister of Finance, resign in the highest decision-making structure of the ANC, resign as the head of the political school. So they don't play with incumbent leaders, and it's not surprising that this particular report says that the Secretary General of the ANC must step aside, particularly with the charges that he is currently facing. George Mashamba doesn't take lightly, and his team doesn't take lightly to ANC leaders being charged with fraud and corruption. It essentially also goes back to how the Integrity Commission never cleared the Deputy President of the country and the Deputy President of the ANC of any wrongdoing when he decided to take himself to the Integrity Commission when he refused to be sworn in as a Member of Parliament and subsequently to be sworn in as the Deputy President of the Republic of South Africa. You remember that whole charade of Deputy President Didi Mabuza. So it's not surprising that the Integrity Commission has decided that the Secretary General of the ANC must step aside. It also essentially means that also it may fuel tensions within the governing party, as there are those who feel as if the Integrity Commission is in bed with the dominant faction within the National Executive Committee of the ANC, led by President Cyril Ramaphosa, who himself has also appeared before the Integrity Commission of the party over the CR17 campaign funds for the 54th National Conference. That particular report is yet to be released on President Cyril Ramaphosa. This judgment or ruling by the Integrity Commission recommendation essentially throws the spanner in the works for the ANC officials who have to come up with guidelines of how the stepping aside resolution will be implemented, judging on the virtue that four of the top 6 officials of the ANC have been to the Integrity Commission and have got questions and a dark cloud hanging over their heads of issues of the CR17 funds, issues of fraud and corruption against the likes of Gwede Mantashe, who allegedly benefited from SAFA. We've got the same against Deputy President Didi Mabuza in his tenure in Mpumalanga. Now you've got the Secretary General of the African National Congress, who's charged with fraud and corruption as well, relating to the over 250 million rand asbestos contract, while also chairperson and premier of the Free State. So the officials of the ANC find themselves conflicted as well on the issue, because they've got an invested interest on the virtue that they've also appeared before the Integrity Commission, and they are also affected by this stepping aside resolution should the Integrity Commission of the party decide that some of them must step aside, like it is alleged now with this report by News 24 and journalist Karine du Plessis that the Secretary General must step aside. He himself, through the engagements that we've had with him, did say that he may feel as if the Integrity Commission will recommend that he will step aside. But question is, will Ace Magashule step aside or not? In an interview with another 24-hour news channel in the country, a commercial one. He did say earlier on during the course of the year that he would never step aside. He repeated those words when he appeared in court in Bloemfontein when he was addressing his supporters outside the Magistrates Court, when he said that only a special national conference of the African National Congress, which is led by the branches of the ANC that elected them as officials in the 54th National Conference, will tell him to step aside. No leader or leaders of the ANC will tell him to step aside. End of quote. That was the words of Ace Magashule in Bloemfontein last month. So it throws a spanner in the works, and it would be rather interesting if he will actually sit in the top 6 meeting that will set up the guidelines of the stepping aside resolution, judging on the virtue that there is a recommendation that he must step aside. But he is not the only one affected by reports of the Integrity Commission. We've not seen the report against the President Didi Mabuza. We've not seen the report against President Cyril Ramaphosa. We've not seen the recommendation report against the National Chairperson, Gwede Mantashe. So 4 of the 6 officials of the ANC are implicated, just like the 22 other leaders of the ANC who appeared when they were about to go to be sworn in as members of parliament after the 2019 general election.
Samkele, thank you so much for bringing us up to date with all those topical conversations. Let's quickly take a look at the tweets you've sent through in relation to our question of the day, where we asked what you think of the